the biggest challenge that we were trying to tackle is how do I continue to draw on a canvas? How do I continue to design on a canvas without having all the time to think of that structure and kind of really get creative?
Welcome to the Creative Chats podcast with Mike Brennan. Welcome to another episode of Creative Chats. It's the podcast for artist makers and content creators where we talk about creativity, the creative process, and story. I'm your host, Mike Brennan. I'd love to invite you to stop by dailycreativehabit.com. I have created all sorts of resources for you because I truly believe that when you create, we all win. So I want to see as many of you stepping into your creativity fully, closing the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And I want to help you do that. So I've created resources like the Daily Creative Habit Journal. I've written a book, Make Fun a Habit. I have all sorts of free resources like this podcast and a Facebook group called Daily Creative Habit. Also the paid membership for Daily Creative Habit where we get together with like-minded creators, all pushing in the same direction, encouraging each other and saying we're going to show up every single day to create something to get our work out there into the world. So if you would like to be a part of any of those things, again, stop by dailycreativehabit.com or simply visit my website, which is mikebrennan.me. If you've ever had a need for building a website, then I'm sure you have searched around for what your options are. And you've probably come across Wix Studio. Well, my guest today is Gali Erez, who is the head of Wix Studio. And we talk about her journey, how she arrived at Wix and the work that they're doing there, what sets Wix apart from other platforms. And honestly, we just have a delightful conversation regarding creativity and how it shows up in Gali's life and what inspires her. She is a builder, and it is very obvious. So I know you're going to enjoy this conversation, and be sure to check out Wix and be sure to go follow Gali and just let her know what you thought about the things that she shared on this episode. I'm sure she would greatly appreciate it. So without further ado, here is my creative chat with Gali Erez. Well, Gali, welcome to the Creative Chats podcast. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited. You know, I don't think I've had anyone who's more in the web designer web space. And so I'm selfishly, I'm of course curious about a lot of things. And I know we're going to get into some amazing things today, not only, you know, the tech stuff, but also your story. And so I appreciate you being here and bringing like a different context for even conversation for this podcast. So again, just thank you for being here.
Again, thanks you for having me. And I'm excited to share a bit, you know, of our world. And and I think it touches many other worlds as well. So I think it will be an interesting conversation.
Yes. So you are the head of Wix Studio. And I'm excited to talk a little bit about that and just what that entails. And just being someone who is, you know, a creative person, having these things, you know, being pouring into them with intention and purpose and having the career that you've had so far. I want to kind of dial things back and just ask you, like, where did this come from? Like, was there a time when you were a kid that you remember doing something really creative that kind of sparked something for you that said, you know what, I am a creative person and I want to like keep pouring into this?
So I would say that in general, I'm a person that loves building new things. Like I'm obsessed with that. And I've always been drawn to like beginnings and to kind of an environment of like a live TV show, you know, production. And I always joke that we walk around the office kind of like if you watch The West Wing, we're running around the office and talking really fast and passing off ideas. And it's very much, I think it's very much my personality and I feel very much at home because of that. And I think it's, you know, when I look back, my parents were actually part of the telecommunication revolution and the dot-com revolution. And my mom was also in tech at a time that weren't many women around the decision table. And I think in general, in like our home, that was always a conversation. And I remember like my mom sharing with me, yeah, we're actually working on this thing where you will be able to stop the TV and hit record. And I'm like, what? Like, I was like, I can't believe this is actually somebody is working on that. It sounds so futuristic, and I've always been very excited about kind of being part of really like putting the foot down in something new in a place that nobody kind of went to yet. It always excited me. And I think now when I look back, it makes a lot of sense why I made all of these career choices. And I think, you can really see it when diving in. And I actually went to Cal Arts, and I think it was a very an incredible experience for me, because Cal Arts is very much about ideas. Like I think some of the actually colleges that I visited and I went to see, many of them were talking about kind of more like technical skills.
Mm-hmm.
And at Cal Arts, a lot of the work is trying to really revolutionize and think how you take design and communicate it and make change with it. And after studying there, actually my first job was I was an intern at the WB.
Oh, nice.
And when I arrived there, so first of all, I'm like big on film and TV, and it was like I couldn't believe I walked into into a candy store. I remember the first day, one of the other interns was like, "Look, there's this hidden closet here, and you can take all the DVDs of like Curb Your Enthusiasm, and you just have to sign somewhere." And I'm like, "Oh my God, that's perfect." So when I got there, the WB understood that they have this insane library, the biggest library in the world, actually, of of film and TV, and it was all still in a huge lot, all of the original footage, okay, and all of the original releases, and they're like, okay, this is the digital age. We need to start moving there. And they created our department, and we were all very new at the concept of UX and of taking media and making it consumable online. And we were working with psychologists that understood the influence of the web on people. Like it was very, it's like it was a very interesting time to go into that. And I learned there an insane amount of things. And what was really exciting, I think, was my boss and many of the art directors there and stuff didn't come necessarily from the obvious like background to the job. Like, for example, my art director he was doing the coolest album covers at the time. He was very well known for that. And they brought him in, to do something completely different. And I'm very into that. Like, I love bringing unexpected, like, talent or unexpected, background into my team. I think it just like changes, it breaks our kind of conceptions of how we look at things.
Totally.
And so that was a very meaningful time for me. I stayed there after I interned for a few years to work. And then I think the next thing that I feel like I'm joining kind of this revolution is when I joined Wix. So I actually joined Wix almost like more than 9 years ago. And we were still very little, and we really felt like, we are bringing people the ability to create an online, presence for themselves. And it was something that you couldn't do that on your own. You needed a developer. You needed to understand many, many things to actually do it. And we were like, we're going to help small businesses. We're going to help them just go online and create for themselves, a business. And it was, I think there was when I started pivoting from more of like UX, very, very being into the UX, where my art director at Wix was bringing me into conversations about marketing and strategy, of like management, even though I was, doing UX, and it like opened my mind completely into the influence of user experience. And I think it very much brought me to the place that I am today, like 9 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, as these different points come to you where it's like, okay,
Mhm.
I have a choice. I can either like kind of pivot into this and learn something that's new, understand something, take on responsibilities that you haven't had before. Like, was there a moment in there where you were kind of like, I don't know about this. Like, I'm not sure either of myself or about this opportunity or about, sometimes the technology because it's so new or anything like that. Like,
Mhm.
were there any, kind of moments like that that you can speak into?
For sure. I think there was many times you feel like, oh, I'm finally like I worked very hard and learned a lot, for example, in UX. And should I actually go into managing, because managing is a completely, it's a different position, it's a totally different everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and it's a big decision if you want to stay and actually enjoy the fruits of all the work that you've done, or take a deep dive and go into something completely new. It's very scary. And I think we've had many moments like that at Wix. Like, even if you look at we built our brand around self creators. And one of the really pivotal moments was, we started seeing more and more professionals using our self creators platform, like our DIY platform, but actually building for others. And they started asking us for more features, and they wanted more complex things. And they're professionals. They know their work, know what's needed, and they wanted to create more complex stuff. And it was a big decision if we want to dive into that, because you become an expert in a certain area. You really understand the intents and the needs of self creators. How do you pivot even inside the company, the way people think? Like, serving professionals is so, so different. Like, it's a totally different world. So I think that was a very exciting moment, and I'm all about the saying yes. Like, let's try it. Like,
Yeah.
I very rarely would say no. Maybe sometimes it's a bad idea, but I'm all about it.
Yeah. When
Mhm.
it comes to technology too, like things are changing so quickly. And I think
Mhm.
sometimes it's so hard to know like what is actually going to last, where to invest your energy and your resources, and what might be like a pass through because it hasn't quite landed just yet, right? Like I think we're seeing a lot of that obviously with AI things.
Mhm.
The growth is so insane, and it feels like every other day there's a new update to something and some other iteration. How do you navigate that kind of space to know what is worth the time, energy, and resources to put into, and to assess like, is this going to be really something that's going to stick around long enough?
Well, I think that's a really great question. And while you were asking that, so many thoughts come to mind, because I think there's a few aspects I could answer on. So one, the understanding is that it's never going to stop changing, right?
Right.
The
Yeah.
evolution is continuous, and it's even more extreme now, where like every day things are changing, every minute, right? It's with everything that is happening in AI, obviously we see that it's improving day by day, and new things are coming up, and certain sectors are completely changing because of it. Companies are closing, companies are opening. Like, it's
Yeah.
it's very on the one hand, it's very exciting. I think anything that is new and big and unknown is very exciting and very scary at the same time. I think for a company like ours, it's the challenge many times is asking yourself, how much am I going to invest, for example, in infrastructure? Okay, because we are a very big company at this point, and to stop and invest in infrastructure is super important. It helps velocity, but it's like more of a long-term thing. And you need to invest a lot of time in it, but then you gain the ability to do things really fast because a lot of things were already written properly and connect and all of that. On the other hand, you want to move really fast. And I think that's a place where we ask ourselves all the time, how do we, is it something that we just want to do quickly, to go out to the market and pay later, or want to pay now? The platformization of things, right? And it's a big challenge, I have to say. I think, but because we do have a lot of years that we built infrastructure, there are many things that we are able to do quickly, and we have the resources to do. And I think when it comes to AI, I actually was part of the team that created ADI, which was like the first website generator that we did here, and we created it. And I think one of our struggles is that many of the technology wasn't out there yet to really, to help us go really, really wild. And it's really exciting now to see that you can do really crazy things. So it's something that we had the seed, and now we can really run fast with it. But still, like, it was a question: is it the right time? I jump if we were to jump on the train just now, is it too late? I think it's questions that we ask ourselves here every day, like in every meeting possibly. And I think at the end, what helps us make the decision is the intents of our users and their needs. That's like that, that is what makes the decision at the end of the day. Like, so it helps a lot. And and I think what we're looking at is that, especially for professionals, efficiency is key. Like being able, I think efficiency, and also being able to create quality that you were never been able to do on your own before. If it's for somebody who's not very good at writing, all of a sudden, they have the tools to write really well and really quickly. And I think all those tedious tasks, or those tasks you want to be really good at and you couldn't before, they're available. You can have those superpowers. So this is something that I think is not going to change very quickly. And I think you can keep inventing there more and more.
Yeah. How do you balance like the efficiency and the rate at which things are developing, and all the kind of, you have to keep up with what's happening, right? Because you can get left behind pretty quickly, I think. Mm-hmm. How do you balance that with also still having this sense of like the human touch and interaction in things, so that things don't become so automated and so, just generated by AI that it's kind of like we've lost something in the mix?
So I think, that's a great question. I think it's again, when I look at professionals, like that's really like the place where, I'm looking at agencies and their day to day, and what would make them happy and love the platform. And that's what motivates me. So for example, I don't know if maybe generating a full, like skipping all the work and generating something all the way would make them happy or bring creativity to the table. Like that's, but I think what's most important to understand, that in my opinion, it's very hard to replace imagination and creativity.
Yes.
And also like the human connection there is between an agency and a client. Mm-hmm. There is that language that you need to have with the client and able to nail that brief that is very, very complex. And we know that like, the part of the creation of the website, or like the online, experience that they bring to their client, it's a part of the work, but there is so much more in the process. And I think that is something that we cannot replace, and we don't want to replace. And I think that's where, again, most of the things that we want to bring to agencies is just to make the tedious things that they have to do that they feel like, why am I working so hard to do this? Those are exactly the places where I feel that's what's interesting, and that's what makes people love using certain apps or certain, things that we love. I was very big on making playlists back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And when Spotify came around with like creating a playlist on your taste, and I have a very eclectic taste, so I was giving them a challenge. I think it was actually very, very exciting for me, and it didn't take away my need or my want to create my own things. But it was giving me inspiration, and it was giving me, and it was taking me to places where I didn't go on my own, like bringing all of a sudden, a track I would never listen to or think of listening to, and expanding the things that I love. So that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you talk about that with Spotify too. I have the same problem where sometimes I listen to some like, music with no words, kind of instrumental stuff that's maybe classical or movie scores or whatever, when I'm doing work and I just need something on. And so sometimes when I want something that's a little more upbeat, and kind of quote normal music that I would listen to, it's feeding me a lot of that stuff. And I'm like, no, wait, can we like figure this out a little bit? So it's funny you mentioned that.
Wow. Yeah. I actually could really relate to that because since my son was born, my Spotify's been ruined. And I have very embarrassing moments where like I have a friend driving with me in the car, and I just press, like a play, they have that DJ function.
Yes.
And it starts playing like Lion King, and so I need to figure that one out. Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, we know you're rocking that out in the car by yourself.
Yeah. We don't believe you. We know it's you.
Yeah. Along those lines, well, not necessarily Lion King, but just in terms of like inspiration, right? Like, where do you personally go for some inspiration and ideas? And maybe it's not even something that's directly correlated with what you're doing and the work that you're doing, but like something that, when you're inspired, it opens you up. And you start asking questions, you start following curiosity, right? And so where do you go to put yourself in that place to kind of collect and be inspired?
So I have a few things that really like motivate me. I really, really love storytelling. I think that's one of the things that I really enjoy. And since I was a kid, there's actually, just as an example, there's the Moth podcast. I don't know if you know it, but it's from NPR, and the idea is that every time there's kind of a subject, and then there's three different people that tell stories that kind of relate to that subject, and they come from like insanely different backgrounds and countries and everything, and it's always full of humor and like this human touching, like, and it's never cheesy, and it's always surprising. And I think that's something that always inspires me, like the way that people can continue to kind of surprise you, and also the storytelling itself. Like there's a way to tell a story, and I get really excited about how people are able to kind of to take a story and tell it really, really well and in an engaging way. So I actually take that a lot to work. I think one of the challenges, obviously of managing a big team is connecting everybody around a story and getting everybody motivated. And so I'm very inspired by that. And I always think of like, how do I tell the story to everybody? How do I bring them in? How do I get them motivated and to see the powerful things we can do together? So that's definitely one place. Another place that I really like, more of a visual place, is totally different. I really enjoy looking at like Fashion Week. And I love seeing how it always feels like everything was invented, especially when you look at like garments and clothes.
Yeah.
And actually, it's really incredible to see how there's always something new and exciting, and also material wise. I think I really enjoy seeing like the development of material that is actually a physical thing. I deal all day with digital,
right.
And and it's exciting to see advances in technology in other places. So I love that. And I also very much enjoy going obviously to art shows and stuff like that to me, obviously, but that's an obvious one, right? Because I'm
Right.
right. Yeah. And I think reading more like historical books. I read a lot. I have this habit since I started managing, I'm under a lot of stress. And I really found the best way to have a really good sleep is to never skip reading before I go to sleep. And I actually try and take books from very different areas. It could be like I just read, for example, like the biggest disastrous financial crisis in history.
Oh.
That one makes me fall asleep really quickly. No, I'm joking. But it's really amazing to see, even how to handle crisis in a totally different industry. And so I'm very big on reading, and I actually try not to read things in my industry. I know it sounds maybe a bit weird, but I feel like all day we're, checking what's new, and we're reading about, what other companies are doing, and seeing all these new and cool creators that we all the time send to each other. But actually, when I have time off of work, I try to get inspiration from things that are not from our industry.
Yeah, that makes sense, because otherwise you can become very isolated and, just inward focused, and you can miss things that you can draw inspiration from that are maybe completely different industries. But if you transferred it over to you and applied it in a certain way, it could maybe revolutionize something. So I think that's smart.
Oh.
It's funny, as I was listening to your answers, I'm thinking to myself, like, even in the way that you find inspiration, that whole thing of you being a builder, it shows up. And, when you know those things about yourself, about how you operate, about your motivations, it really helps you lean into it with more purpose and intent. And I think even in those situations, you're gathering stories, you're gathering visual, mediums and inspiration. Even like when you talked about fashion, and there being this physical sense of something being constructed, right?
Exactly.
And so I can see how those things would be of interest to you and inspire you further to do the work that you're doing. And so that's why I love these conversations. I find them fascinating, just kind of peeling back the onion a little bit,
Yeah, you made me think a little bit like, what am I doing? What am I doing? How did it happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny too, because sometimes we're so close to the things that we're doing that for us, it kind of is like we're blind to it, right? It's no big deal, or it's just that's just what I do. And then it takes sometimes someone else coming alongside of us and actually asking questions and being curious about something. And then you reflect and you're like, oh, I guess not everybody does that. Or I guess that is a little bit unique to me, And so hopefully that's encouraging to you and continues to, just support just how you're doing things.
Thank you. Thank you. I love that observation.
Yeah. So I would love to ask you a little bit about just, Wix, and as a platform. Obviously, there's a bunch of different platforms that people could go to. And, what is it that makes Wix stand out, do you think?
So so when I think about Wix Studio, I think, there are a few things that I feel very passionate about, that I feel are very, very unique. First of all, I think because we're a lot of the team come from design, so we're kind of designers creating for designers. And you can even feel that with the Wix Studio canvas. And I think when you look at the more professional platforms, because the web is very, very structured, and the structure is super important, but it can very much constrain you. And what the biggest challenge that we were trying to tackle is, how do I continue to draw on a canvas? How do I continue to, design and think design on a canvas without having all the time to think of that structure and kind of really get creative? So I feel that's something that we worked very hard on to create, and I'm very proud of it. And I feel like it's incredibly fun to create on on the canvas, because it's so free and it's drag and drop, and also the way you can really see things come to life when you start making them animated, or you start, just bringing them to life basically, and seeing it already on stage, and have that, having that visual concept, and then that you can go ahead and actually build it on yourself, and bridging, and not having to bridge that gap where you have to explain to a developer, oh, I wanted to move a little bit more like that. Here are some inspirations. Can you make it look like that? You don't have to do that. You actually work on stage and do it yourself. And that's why we also bring a lot of no code capabilities. We're really trying to bring that, that state of mind of a designer being to freely design. It means that they need to just be able to put things on stage and make them look how they want, if it's, in every aspect. And that's why we're thinking a lot, how can we package things to become no code? How can we make them super available and also still have all the capabilities and the tedious decisions designers love to make, if it's going to be a little bit over here and a little bit in that color or in that movement. And it's something I think, we really set ourselves to try and be excellent at it. I think that's a place that I love, and I think another place it touches upon that is, so Wix has this huge ecosystem of all these business solutions, and I think being able to set up so quickly a booking service or an online store and all of that is insanely powerful. And also being to connect all of that in one stage and design it on the stage, and really make it how you want it, even the most complex business areas of the site. So I think kind of that combination really brings this nice proposition, I think, for agencies. And another place that we're very much invested in, which is I talked about a little bit earlier, is all this place of how do we look holistically on the process of an agency from the moment they start pitching to a client all the way to production, many times also maintenance of the site. So we're trying to find all these places where we can bring a lot of efficiency and a lot of value to the agency, so they can really leave as much time for the creative part, which is the most, the part that everybody most enjoy, and try to take out that friction that just brings burnout. A lot of designers and agencies, I think, very easily burn out. You start with this really cool concept for the client. It starts to get complicated. You get feedback, you change all of that, and it ends up not what you wanted. So I think that's a place where we really want to help, and we want to make that as seamless as possible.
Yeah. I have to say, selfishly, when you said no code, I was like, ooh, I'm sitting up a little bit more because, as a designer myself, I started in print, and a lot of the things that I've experienced in the web world, I was like, man, this feels more like science than art. And I am certainly more an artist than a scientist. So,
Yes.
when you talk about the frustration of sitting there and trying to get into something because you're like, I just wanted to do this. Why is this taking me hours on end to do this? And then it erodes your sense of joy and, passion for what you're really trying to do in making the thing designed really well, and the excitement that originally brought you to a project. It's certainly, like you said, it can cause burnout or just frustration. So thank you for touching on those things. I think those are very real world scenarios that a lot of us experience. Just curious too, like in terms of things that you've heard that people have been really excited about, that they're like, this is a feature that I am blown away by, or that they're just celebrating that you've rolled out. Is there anything besides the things that you've already mentioned that would be something that comes to mind?
So I think we have in a few areas things that I think are super exciting. One is that we added this capability where everything you drop on stage is by default scales proportionally. So think you're designing in pixels. You can design everything in pixels, but then when you start resizing the stage, you will see that the whole layout that you have created and you really love, it just scales proportionally and keeps the harmony between all the elements. And that's like a very powerful moment that we saw with a lot of the creators, where they were, again, very freely working on the stage, creating exactly the layout they wanted, the design they want, and then just everything works like magic. You start resizing and it looks still so good, and it's a very exciting moment. I think another place that we got a lot of exciting feedback is all those like very very designery features of like the no code visuals that we bring. It's like text marquee, that it's just a component you drop on the stage and it has all the behavior built in. So you just design it really like how you want it, and then you just preview and you see it running and you can control the speed and all of that. And it's just so accessible, like, you know, it's so in your hands. And so all those type of things that we create, we get incredible feedback on. And I think something that we keep evolving and changing and is also very powerful is we have an AI solution for creating responsivity for your site. We call it like AI responsive, and basically you just you can select a section and run it, and it will make sure everything resizes well for all the different screen sizes. So of course you can go after that and change the things that you want to behave differently, and you can also do it all manually if you really love that part. You know, it's a very technical part, saying when the screen is like this, move over here and be in this size and catch this space and be in 20% relate to the other element and all of that. But if you're less about that, or you know, there's certain things that you don't, you know, they're more like simple, and you don't feel like that's exactly going to bring your creativity out, then you can just run that. And that's something, again, with AI, you come out with a feature and you just keep getting feedback and improving it. You are in a feedback loop where you're trying to improve it and get the best results. And so I think there we keep investing and making it, you know, as to get like the most perfect results and all of that. And I think we have actually many things that are going to be rolling out that I can't talk about. But something we did release recently, we released a plugin for Figma, and that like saves people an insane amount of time. You know, if they start, some of the designers start in Figma, so having to bring the Figma file and start building it within the editor is obviously very time consuming. And again, it's not the most creative part of your process. So that was very important for us to, you know, bring the ability to just bring it in and then make it into a real site, right? And make it into a real thing. So that's something we released just a few weeks ago, actually, and we saw like an amazing feedback and usage. So it was really, really cool to see that the impact you can make on somebody's like day to day. That's very exciting for us.
Yeah, I love it because, you know, again, it just goes right along with the theme of building, right? You're adding features, you're building this platform and adapting it to the needs of people, making sure it's serving people and not just simply, you know, throwing in features to make it bloated and just because, you know, it's something that somebody had an idea on. It sounds like it's
and it's really always very tempting.
Yeah,
it's
I'm
always
sure.
Very tempting too. Like, but that's so cool. But I'm like, nobody's going to use it. Like,
right. And that's the stuff that you kind of save on the side to go, maybe one day it'll have a second life in some sort of way.
Good thing we have hackathons here once in a while so people can get that out.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I really have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation today, just learning about you personally and just seeing, you know, your journey. hearing about just, what's happening at Wix Studio. I mean, it's just been a pleasure to hear all this. I'm sure people are intrigued to try the platform, to get in there and start, what can I do? And so, any place that you want to send anybody to, even if they're like, they want to connect with you, something about your story really resonated, any place that they can, connect with you or just even try the platform, where would you want to send people?
Sure. So to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, write me there. I'd love to hear like your thoughts and thoughts on the platform and on this conversation, anything really. And for Wix Studio, I would love obviously everybody to try it out and play around with it and see how cool it is. So you can just go to wixstudio.com or search on Google. And you'll find it right away. So.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll be sure to put links in the show notes too, so people can just click and easily follow along and check all the things out. So yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for today. It was a pleasure to meet you. And I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot more about you. You are just a breath of fresh air in the things that you're doing and just how you're doing it. I think you're the perfect person for where you are and what you're doing, according to this conversation. Again, I'm just encouraged by the stuff that you're doing and can't wait to hear even more. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It was such a fun time talking to you, and it opened my mind to think a little bit about what we're doing and why we're doing things. So thank you.
Thanks for listening today. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe, leave a rating and a review. It really helps this podcast be seen and heard by others.